Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all having a good afternoon. Well done on braving the weather again in Queensland and coming out and getting around the place today. My name's Ben Watts. I'm the CEO of What's Next, and we're a human resources company. So today we're going to talk about sustainable culture, talk about people, HR and a sustainable culture. So a little bit about us to start with. We're an external HR team for growing businesses. We take a very commercial approach to HR. We very much look at it from sitting in a business owner's shoes. We're a small business ourselves, and so we try to take a commercial approach towards our HR practices. We do a mix between business advisory and people performance. So very much like a commercial HR team, when we provide those services out to small to medium businesses. We say it's everything from the lunchroom to the boardroom. And we've got offices in Brisbane and in New York. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we're seeing in the market, just to give a bit of we work across a whole lot of industries, so it's sometimes good just to share what we're seeing in the market at the moment. What's sustainable culture? And then the three pillars of sustainable culture. So the HR strategy pillar, the employee performance framework side of it, and management action. So there's three different pillars we look at from a sustainable culture perspective. So what we're seeing in the market. So interesting time for small business at the moment. Really, really tight candidate market, really hard to find staff, really hard to find talent. It's an issue at the moment. It's been an issue now for 6 to 12 months. Really hard to find people out there in the market. We've had a month full of short weeks, 4-day weeks, which I'm sure you've all had fun fumbling through. Really tough. We've had a lot of weather events in southeast Queensland specifically. And then the COVID waves coming through. It's a really tough time for small business at the moment. A lot of our clients are battling through some of those challenges, which are a little bit different than normal. Well, I've just returned from the US actually, and the other thing that really stands out from our clients over there and here is hybrid workplaces. So the way that the workforce is changing considerably. Since COVID, people are now expecting to be able to work part in the office and part not in the office. And so we're seeing that not only be a trend through the COVID period, but really start to stick now. When we were in Chicago, we're staying in the business district in an Airbnb there, and there was no one around. There's no one around on the roads, no business people. In Wall Street in New York, there's probably 10 tourists to every one business person walking around, and anyone who's been there, you see people around with briefcases everywhere usually. Just not seeing that now in some of those big cities in the US. Even in Brisbane, it's quieter than normal when you're out there on the road. All of our clients are now used to working in these hybrid scenarios, but it adds complexity. It absolutely adds complexity to everyone's business. So what we've looked at today is tried to look at culture. We talk about culture a lot in business, and defining exactly what that is quite difficult. It's quite difficult to define. Everyone looks at it very differently. But if we look at about 85% of our clients come to us wanting to improve the performance of their teams, performance of individuals, but also they come to us saying we want to have better culture. Now, thinking about the hybrid workforce like we're just talking about now, that really adds complexity to building a culture. It really does change. Managing employees through screens is very difficult compared to having them in front of you and being able to read body language and handle that on a day-to-day basis. So this is a little poll here just to kick us off. And just out of interest, we've got 4 different selections here, but how would you best describe a good culture? So not in your business, but just in general, if you were to choose one of these 4 things here, how would you best describe a good culture? So we've got a bit of a mixed bag there. And I'm not surprised about having a mixed bag there. High performance and productive is the highest rated. Consistent, accountable and sustained is up high as well. Fun, happy and creative, flexible, casual and relaxed have all got some people picking them. I'm really not surprised with those results because bits of all of that are part of a good culture, and those questions were to show that mixed bag, so thank you for doing that. So we're often asked to define culture, and I think if you asked 100 different business people, you're probably going to get 99 different answers, and that's what I'm trying to show here. I break culture down into 2 different things, a surface culture or a sustainable culture. Now, surface culture is what we see on the outside, drinks on a Friday night, lunches, gifts, great office views, great office ergonomic setups, cars, bonuses, those sort of things we call surface culture. Really important, fantastic things to bring into your workplace, but in a hybrid working environment, much harder to rely on, but is a very important part of culture. That's what I would call a surface culture. So what do we actually mean by sustainable culture? So I break it down into 3 pillars. We've created the HR strategy pillar, the employee performance framework pillar, and the management action pillar. So I'm trying to put some framework around what culture actually is so we can get down there, measure it, and actually make it better in our workplaces. So we've split it into these 3 pillars. So we'll talk about each of them in a little bit more detail. So HR strategy. When we talk about HR strategy, I talk about things like vision, mission, values. I mean, we've all got these in business. A lot of us intrinsically know what they are, but vision is really what drives us forward. It's aspirational goal. It keeps us on track. It's what we talk about when we're in a board meeting. We talk about our vision, and it's an aspirational line, North Star that we're heading towards. Mission is really a purpose. It's a why. It's like, why are we in business? Why did we create this business in the first place, and what impact do we have on the world? What's the flow on to the rest of the world? It's a feeling, your purpose. It's really important these days to have a strong purpose, because the younger generation coming through really want to work for something that's bigger than themselves. They want to be part of something emotionally, and so a purpose is really important in your business. And then, of course, your values, which are your behaviours that you want people to be showing when you're not there. So then you look at a hybrid workplace, and you look at across the vision, mission, values becomes more important. You've got people that aren't in front of you that you can't manage from visually looking at all the time. Your vision, mission, values becomes even more important. So an important aspect of a HR strategy. And then functional structure. So with structure, I always look at it, structure is about function and not hierarchy. So functional structure is where who's accountable for your sales, who's accountable for your finance, who's accountable for your operations. So a functional structure is extremely important to a growth business, and often where we see businesses stunt their growth is where there's not a functional structure in place. There's a lot of all-rounders, and I think we've all been in this situation. It's great. Everyone can fill each other's roles when they're not available, and it's great to have all-rounders, but it's really difficult in the long term in a growth side. So functional structure, extremely important. It also helps with succession planning, and it helps with showing people in your business where the pathway is, a career pathway that you've got there. So again, hybrid workplaces, extremely important to have a functional structure. And then joining that functional structure is, of course, clearly defined roles. The small businesses error that we see quite often is that people build roles around individuals. They have a highly sought after individual and they build a role to suit them. It's the wrong way to go about it. We like a clear functional structure, then clear outcome-based roles. So what's next? We call them outcome profiles. So instead of a list of tasks there that just shows people what they should be doing, we call them an outcome profile where the outcomes of that role are very clear and they always remain with that functional structure. They don't go with the individual, and individuals come and go from that role. So you can see here, clear vision, mission and values, clear functional structure, clearly defined outcome-based roles within that. And then we've also thrown in here an anonymous survey. So again, hybrid workplace is extremely important to give people the opportunity to provide feedback to you anonymously, without judgment. And we always, business owners, have gaps. We have blind spots. An anonymous survey is something that really allows us to get that feedback that we might find something out there that we're just not quite aware about, and getting that, really getting that engagement pulse check. So if we look at the first pillar I'm talking about here, a HR strategic pillar, vision, mission, values, functional structure, clearly defined outcome-based roles, and anonymous survey to get that feedback coming back through. So that's the strategic pillar. So I've got another one here for you guys to vote against. Regarding your HR frameworks internally, and by the HR frameworks I mean your onboarding, your probation, your one-on-one catch-ups and performance reviews, do they link together, stand alone, or have gaps or not exist? If you could be as honest as possible here, that'd be great. All of us as business owners know that there are gaps, right, in our HR practices. Often there's some standalone areas that work, but does everything link together? Does it all underpin what we're all about? So you hear a lot of business owners talk about a performance culture. Now this is what we're talking about here when we're talking about frameworks. So you can see there a lot of people do have gaps or non-existent process. So the second pillar I want to talk about is an employee performance framework. Again, 4 components of this pillar. There's an onboarding process, a probation, one-on-one meetings directly with your manager, and performance reviews. So each of these are feedback loops, and they're really, really important. Again, looking at it from a hybrid perspective, hybrid working environment where not everyone's standing in front of us. Having these and having them consistent and holding people accountable is an extremely important part. So we'll talk about how these things link together. So not only are they at their own performance loop, their own feedback loop, standalone, they also link together. Yeah, and so if we start with onboarding, coming in new into a business, you want to know about the vision, mission, values, you want to know what it's all about, you want to understand the purpose, you want to understand where you fit into that business. The onboarding process in small business is missed a lot. Usually you get thrown in front of a computer and get moving because it's taken us ages to find someone and we want to move on and get on with business, yeah? So onboarding, that process there at the start, being consistent, all your managers doing it the same way and people having the same experience is really, really important part of a performance framework. Then the probation framework. So probation is probably the most underutilised HR framework in small business by far. And the amount of times we have clients come to us and say, look, we've got someone coming up to 6 months, we're not sure whether we want to keep them, right? And it's easy to happen, 6 months fly by when you've thrown someone into a new role and you're powering along. But really, a probation framework should be around 3 catch-ups in that first 6 months. So a best practice situation is a 1-month catch-up, a 3-month catch-up, and a 5-month catch-up over that first 6 months. So you've got someone working there. And they're 3 mini performance reviews, right? It's an opportunity for the new employee to give feedback to you. Is it what they signed up for? It's an opportunity for you to give the feedback back to them, right? Probation is an extremely important framework to have and to, again, consistently use and to get someone who's coming new into your business up to speed as quick as possible. So we want to manage people either out or up in that first 6-month period. So leaving it too late is a missed opportunity. One-on-ones. So if I had $1 for every time someone said to us, oh, we catch up all the time when we ask people about one-on-one catch-ups, this should be a formal part of your HR system. Managers and one-on-one catch-ups with employees are extremely important. That's the way that the employee gets feedback. And again, in a hybrid example where there's some at home and some in the office, we need to be really consistent and hold people accountable, managers accountable and employees accountable to some regular catch-ups. Look, that can be around workflow, but can also be about how they're travelling. It can be mental health related. It can be where they want to head in your business. But it's really important to keep the regularity with those one-on-one catch-ups. And then performance reviews. Another one that's really not utilised well in the small business world. Once a year is just not enough for a performance review. It should be happening regular, at least twice a year. In small business, maybe quarterly is a really good practice, but at least twice a year is the way to go. I often use the analogy around a football scenario where in round 1, if you waited to round 17 to give the feedback to a player in round 1, it's unfair on that player, right? They've had all those other games to play in between, and that's what happens in the business world when we're not giving performance reviews out to our team. So when you look at this employee performance framework, which is the second pillar of a sustainable culture, I really want you to look at how they all link together and how that can underpin a culture and show consistency and also teach your managers how you want your touch points to be with your employees. So getting up to the third pillar here is management action. So we've got another one here for your clickers. If you could just put these answers down. With poor staff behaviour, what best describes your approach? And I mean your approach individually, but also what your managers are doing here with your team as well. I'm not sure if there's people not being brave and saying that sometimes they don't put their head in the sand, but I know me as a business owner, I often avoid that emotion. We're like the plumber with a leaky tap sometimes, because I know as a business owner how difficult that is to have the conversation sometimes, right? So not surprised that no one picked that one there, but I know personally I definitely put my head in the sand on occasions. But a big part of culture is how you deal with poor performance and poor behaviour within your business. So with this third pillar, the management action, there's four components. Timely action is the most important, and where we see falling down the most with our clients is saying, okay, we've been monitoring this, we've been watching things happen over a period of time, but they haven't given the feedback straight away. So being timely, calling poor performance out, poor behaviour out, whether it's someone coming in late, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's bullying, regardless of who that individual is, getting in there and doing it in a timely manner and making sure that all of your managers are doing that, extremely important. And of course, consistency. So it's very difficult to be strong sometimes with some of your best performers, and sometimes we let those best performers get away with a little bit more than others. But extremely important that you and your managers are consistent with your calling out of this behaviour. And this is a real HR thing, but notes and filing, extremely important. Even if things are just happening for the first time, make a note, send yourself a text or send yourself an email and just put it in your file. We can use that information for action down the track. But if we don't do that, it's very, very difficult to use that down the track. And of course, then following up. So following up, setting the expectation and closing that loop back around to making sure people are changing that behaviour and improving along the way. So 4 simple steps there, but that management action, extremely important to be consistent, accountable, and the same across all of your managers in your business. If one's doing it differently, it really can affect your culture. And if high performers are getting away with more than someone who's just been there for a week, again, very, very damaging to culture. So this is what I would call the third pillar of a sustainable culture. Now, we've got a bit of a matrix here, which I've just given you as a takeaway. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but what we find when we are addressing serious issues within a business around poor behaviour, and let's just use the example of a bullying scenario. People are either all or nothing. So we find that there's either ignored and it's not dealt with, or there's a huge investigation that just takes up everyone's time and goes way too deep into the situation. So we've created a bit of a matrix here just to guide you. And look, every situation is different, but it is a really good matrix to guide what should happen when you've seen a poor behaviour or you've seen an issue within your team. And it's got everything there from if it was just a rumour right through to whether it was Fair Work coming to you and knocking on the door saying, look, now you've got to go and defend yourself in this situation. So we've given a lot of different examples there. It's just a guide, but we find it's really, really helpful to guide, especially new managers, into what they should be doing in these situations. So yeah, take that away and use that. Okay, on the other sheet that I've got you there, we've got a bit of an activity, and it's a self-audit. It's what we call a sustainable culture self-audit. So I've broken it into the 3 pillars that we've talked about. So HR strategy, employee performance framework, and management action. There's 4 components of each of those pillars. So if you can give yourself a score out of 4, and be really honest with yourself, give yourself a score out of 4 for each of those pillars, and we'll get a score out of 12 overall. Very basic scenario of being able to audit your culture internally. And if you could just have a little chat around your tables around that and spend 5 minutes going through that, it's a really good tool to use and take back into the office. Always good to see some good discussion around the table, so that's fantastic. And just take that back into your workplace, that self-audit form, because I think it's something you can talk to about with your other team members as well. So did anyone miss a pillar altogether in their business? Is anyone brave enough to say? No, that's good. That's good. Did we get anyone who was under 10? That's about the mark we say. Like if 10 or above is a good score. If you can get to about that 10 mark, and you've got something in each of the pillars, that's what you want to be aiming for. But ideally, 12 would be fantastic. But what we've tried to do with this is, as I said before, culture is really difficult to explain and to measure. And this is a way of breaking it down and being able to actually measure it. So just going back over there, the 3 pillars: HR strategy, employee performance framework, and that's linking everything together and underpinning everything in your culture, and then management action, fast action when you see poor behaviour. They're the 3 different pillars we look at, and what I would love you guys to go back into your workplaces and consider. So it's a bit of a formula. It's putting something together there you can work with and you can use and talk to your managers about, is what we're trying to create there. So it's not just this grey, scary thing called culture. It's something you can actually address and measure over time. So really, in summary, that hybrid working headache is what we call it. It's difficult. It's difficult managing people. It's difficult managing people in the best of scenarios. But then when you've got them, some in the office, some not in the office, changing situations, and you can't see body language. You can't just... There was an example this morning when I was in our office. One of our team members and I both got an email at the same time. She was standing in the kitchen. She responded to me before I just read the email, and she responded to me while she was getting a coffee in the kitchen. This all happened within a few seconds. That would have taken a phone call, an email response, responding to a few different people. It would have been a longer communication if she was not in the office. But she was. It was a lot easier. And they're the situations that we just take for granted when we've got people in front of us, and we do forget when people aren't. So that hybrid headache, really start to look at how you can massage some of those surface culture things that you do, and so it works through the screen, it works to people that are at home. But then really look at that sustainable culture aspect. Put some effort into those different pillars within your business, and I really think that sustainable culture is a way that you can develop, deliberately get better at what you're doing within your business. And like I said, it's a really tight market. Really, really tight market. And in small business, we've also got wage pressure at the moment. There's an election coming up. We're talking about the minimum wage going up, 5%. Super goes up 1st of July. Really tight candidate market, so supply and demand's really difficult. We really want to focus this year on retention, keeping people in our businesses, keeping our high performers, and really focusing on your sustainable culture and really building that out this year is going to help you considerably. And I think that's about it. I've got a little quote here, just suits this situation, is culture is what motivates and retains talented employees. So you can deliberately focus internally and build your cultures. And I think that's something that, a lot of people take for granted that they've got a good culture. This is a way to actually approach it and, deliberately work on it. So thanks very much, everybody.